Welcome back to the Shared Practices podcast. This is season 4 on case acceptance. This outro is recorded from my car. I was inspired by Mark Costes and how decent his car recording sounded. However, I do have a theory that Mark Costes drives a nicer car than me, so his road noise is probably better. So I apologize if it's pretty bad right now. My life is at a high crazy state right now. My daughter had her tonsils out last Tuesday, so this is like a week and a day ago. And then my wife left for New York, so I was alone with my 5-year-old, my 3-year-old. And for those parents out there who've had children go through surgery and trying to convince a irrational 5-year-old at 3 a.m. to take medication when it just hurts and they can't swallow, and the medication is what's going to stop the pain, but they won't take it because they're in pain. It's been a lot of sleepless nights. And then Monday night, Sunday night, I can't even remember, she threw up blood. So we went to the ER and they did a second surgery to cauterize the tonsil bed. So it's been crazy. So tonight I'm leaving for the Dental Success Summit in Phoenix, which is another appropriate reason for me to be doing an intro outro Mark Costes style from the car. Super excited for that. Excited to see Mark and Kira and Alistair McDonald. I'm going to interview Alistair for an episode. Excited to see George. Him and I are going to do another episode together. It's going to be a lot of fun. Today's episode is with a new potential co-host for the show. And we'll talk about that in the interview. But this is Dr. Olya Banchik. And you'll hear in the interview our story of kind of how I reached out to her. But she is unique in that she is a buyer's advocate / broker. A lot of people reach out to us and they're like, hey, I need help buying a practice. I don't want to rely on the seller's broker, which is a good thing. You should not do that. And we like to have a couple people that we're really comfortable referring people to and saying, hey, go reach out to this person. So Brian Hanks is one of those people. And now Dr. Olya Banchik is another one of those people that we just love, and I feel 100% comfortable sending people to help look at practices, to help transition, to help get through this process, kind of like your quarterback or your coach through this whole thing. And her pricing structure is pretty unique. She just charges hourly, which I in all honesty, like, some people don't like it when professionals charge hourly. I love it. I think it's just the most transparent, like, here's what my time is valued. And if your project takes more time, then yeah, it's going to cost a little more. If it takes a little less time, then it costs a little less, versus people who have like a package deal. And then once you've paid that amount of money, they're like losing money the more time they spend with you, if that makes sense. So anyways, we'll get into this interview and I'll talk with you on the outro. This is Dr. Olya Banchik.
Recently, I went to Washington, D.C. with my family for a wedding. We ended up using Uber every single time we needed to get somewhere. We could have taken a cab, which would have been more expensive, sometimes convenient, sometimes not, or we could have rented a car, which would have cost a little bit more up front, but we would have had more freedom. However, I would have had to navigate DC, figure out where to park it, and then pay all the parking fees. So why did we use Uber? It was both more convenient and less expensive. That's the exact same thing with Lab Pronto. Lab Pronto is Blue Sky Bio's solution to both convenience and cost. So within Blue Sky Bio, you can just export to Lab Pronto and access all these labs across the country that are plugged in. You could buy your own 3D printer, have a lot more control, and become the lab yourself, or you could send your cases to a traditional lab that's going to charge you $400 to $500 per case for the designing and fabricating of the guide and sending it back. Why not have the best of both worlds? Why not have a more convenient solution that actually costs less? That's exactly what Lab Pronto is. Check it out within the Blue Sky Bio software. Click on the button at the very top called Lab Pronto. You're going to be exporting your cases and getting them back in no time.
Okay, I have with me today Dr. Olya Banchik. How are you doing today, Olya?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Richard.
This is a little interesting because you posted on our shared practices page in response to someone asking about valuation or asking for help. And you posted, and I hadn't seen your name on our page before, and I hadn't heard you on any podcasts. And so I was like, who is this person? So I started kind of asking some probing questions because you posted in response, like offering to help.
And I was like, is this a broker? Is this like a third party professional? But, like I was trying to figure out who you were and what you did. And then a few people jumped on the thread and like started vouching for you. And I was like, okay, I need to reach out and talk. And so we had a conversation. And within 20 minutes of this conversation, I said, would you like to co-host a show with me for a season or however long you want to? Which normally in my phone conversations with other dentists, that's not like 20 minutes into the first time we've met. I'm begging them to come co-host the podcast with me for a period of time. So I just want to preface your introduction to our listeners with that immediately within a very short period of time of talking with you, I could tell that everything that you've done in dentistry and what you're trying to do right now and what you've done for your clients and the people you've helped is right in line with shared practices and our philosophies. So welcome to the show with that kind of introduction.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here. And it's funny because I normally would have never, jumped in like that. And I think I mentioned that to you. I don't know what I was thinking. And yeah, I've never posted before. I just saw this question and I felt like I had to answer it and address it because it was so appropriate. And I felt like I had a lot to say. So I probably should have approached that a little differently, but you and I did have a great conversation, and everything that I do and all of the experience that I have had is kind of right up the podcast and the Facebook group. So I just felt like I had something to say. So
you were right to jump in. So in order to kind of fill people in a little bit, you are a practicing dentist who helps others with their transitions, kind of like a buyer's broker, but a little different. And we can get into that in a minute. So if people are looking to buy a practice and they need some help and some coaching and some quarterbacking, you do that for them, which is not a service that is very common. So we'll get into that, but you also have a pretty amazing story and a pretty amazing history, both recently and originally. So why don't you share kind of your journey of you and your husband from dental school to now in 5 to 10 minutes, and whatever side tangents we take, we'll take.
Yeah, sure. No pressure there. 5 minutes. Yeah. So our story, I graduated from NYU in 2003, and he was at Boston, both dental schools. We're both dentists. And, senior year, he said, hey, we're going to be applying for residency. And our plan was always to move back out west, right? We were on the East Coast. We're both from Southern California. Our families are there. And ultimately, that was the plan. That was the goal. We were going to do a residency somewhere on the West Coast, and that was where we were going to spend the rest of our lives.
What part of Southern California are you from?
I am from Orange County.
Okay.
And so from Irvine. My husband's from LA. His parents are in the Valley in LA. And we both went to UC Irvine for college. We didn't know each other, but we both went there.
Cool.
And so we were kind of, headed that way.
Okay, cool. I decided on my 2-year mission to LA, Arcadia, Pasadena area. That's where I realized I wanted to do dentistry. It's also where I learned Spanish and decided I wanted to do dentistry through the Army. So my origins in dentistry all start in LA as well. So
I would love to. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. That sounds really interesting. I wonder we'll have to talk about that one day.
Sure. Yeah. So what kind of residency were you guys planning on doing?
It was just, it was a general practice residency. And at the time, Las Vegas had the most amazing program. It wasn't one of those programs that, you hear about, but the senator of Nevada at the time was a dentist. So he was, really excited about this program, and it was a good one. It was solid. The training was excellent. We had, all the residents had their own assistants. It was just an excellent residency program. So we couple matched actually, and they accepted both of us with really, strict instruction about personal conduct as they were accepting both of us into the program. Huh. So we thought, okay, we'll do this for a year and then we'll get going. And what happened was a friend of ours, he was opening practices. And back in 2003, 2004, Las Vegas was just booming. The economy was so strong, the growth was incredible. And he said, he kind of gave us the opportunity of a lifetime, something that we never would have anticipated. And he said, hey, if you guys stay here, help me, grow these practices and work with me, and I will make you a partner. So here's my husband who's, fresh out of school, not even finished with residency, or maybe just barely finished with residency. And he becomes a partner at this growing group practice type of.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It was an amazing experience. And we were so grateful to have it. And, the level of learning that you get from doing something like that is just, it's really unparalleled. So he did that. We did that for about 10 years. And while he was, doing that and working with this practice, or practices, I should say, ultimately we knew that was something that was going to be sold to a private equity firm. So I've pretty much done private practice on my own, kind of on the side.
So you had your own separate practice from him. Is that how that worked?
I started a very small practice back in 2007.
Okay.
Which it was tiny. I was kind of renting space within a practice. It was a big learning experience for me. And I ended up selling that practice because we thought we were going to move to another state at the time. So a few years down the line, I ended up purchasing another practice.
Okay.
And that one, I wouldn't say it was a fixer-upper. It was a good practice. It wasn't a high-producing practice. It was relatively, needed to be fixed.
Do you remember we tend to talk shop and talk numbers on the podcast, no pressure, but do you remember what it was doing collections wise and what you paid for it or anything like that?
Yeah, I do. I know what I paid for it. It was about $330,000.
Okay.
And I purchased it, I think it was at about 75. It was 75% of their collection. So they were something in the 400s.
Okay.
It's interesting. This is kind of off topic, but there's actually a question in the group about a very similar situation. And there were a lot of comments. I was going to write and talk about my experience with this practice and how great it was and what we were able to do with it, and how we took this practice and turned it into a $2 million practice in about 3.5 years.
That's amazing. Years. Okay, cool. So did you post that, or you're going to, or you decided not to?
I just saw the question right when you and I were jumping on this call. And then, but you know what? I'm always so tempted to write these answers in your group, but there's so much that I want to say. And then I also have so many questions that it's really hard to just write 3 lines about, yes, this is a good opportunity, or don't do it, it's a mistake,
Don't be afraid to word vomit. Like I think our group, of any group, if you were to post like some massive wall of text on someone else's question, that would be very welcomed and very appreciated by everyone. So do not be afraid to either ask more questions or share long form experiences. I feel like I'm proud of the Shared Practices Facebook group in that we don't have like the snarkiness that tends to exist on some other Facebook groups. And we generally have people who are like honestly seeking feedback, even if it's not their bias. You know what I mean? Like they will take suggestions to heart and not just kind of like, this is what I think. And they're really just looking for everyone to pat them on the back and confirm what they already believe. So feel free to do 5-page long posts on people's comments.
That sounds good. I wanted to, and I might, and I think I will respond to that question, but I could do an entire, I could talk about that particular opportunity in that post for a long time. So I'll try to summarize it and respond. So,
well, maybe we should do a whole nother episode on that, because we've tended to advise people away from the fixer-upper practices, only because, I don't know, we've seen that a really small practice with a small patient base
is harder to scale. A $400,000 to do what you did, to take a $400,000 practice to 2 million is a lot harder in our minds than taking an $800,000 or $900,000 practice to 2 million. But obviously it can be done because you did it. You did it well. So I think we should have another episode on that, because what I do want to capture today is your recent startup experience. So I can't let us get sidetracked, even though I really want to. And you're like at the perfect time for us to talk about your startup. So we'll just tease the listeners that we'll have to have another episode on what you did to take a smaller practice. But before we move on from that, how many operatories was it?
So when we purchased it, it had 3 ops that were equipped.
Okay.
And 4 ops that were plumbed.
You said 4 or 5? Sorry, it kind of cut out.
4.
4.
Yep. It had four ops that were plumbed, 3 that were equipped. And so ultimately, and there were two owners of the practice. One was a practicing dentist, and the other one was just a managing dentist partner.
Okay.
That wasn't really involved in the clinical part of it. And yeah, so even at that capacity with the 4 ops, we were able to really, and I have to check the numbers because in 2015, so this is about 2 years later, we ended up almost doubling the number of ops. So we remodeled and made it bigger, took over the space next door and built it out to 7 ops.
Okay.
So yeah, but even at the 4 ops, I think one of the most important things to think about is look at each operatory and think about how each operatory can be used to maximize its capacity, right? Its production.
Yeah.
If we think about a practice that way, even when we're talking about a 3-op practice, you can still, if you think about it that way, you can still find a way to get your numbers to increase. And that was ultimately what we did. So even in a 4-op practice, we were able to take it to well over $1 million.
That's awesome.
In those, couple of years. Yeah.
Well, okay, now I want to know. We're gonna have to do at least like 5 minutes on this. What were some of the things that you really saw that allowed you to grow in that way in that practice?
Sure. Well, I think there are so many things that it has to be the perfect situation, right? And there's so many things that have to come together in order to make this practice a success. And one of those things was actually what the posting doctor mentioned, and that is you have to look at the procedures that are currently being done. And can you expand on those? Like if the practice is already, if they're placing implants, if they're doing ortho, if they are, doing extractions with bone grafts, if they're doing all these procedures and they're still, collecting $350,000 a year, well, maybe the location isn't that great, or maybe the demographics don't support the expenses that, these patients would have to take on. So you have to look at something like that and see, well, when you come in, what are you going to be able to bring into the table that's going to allow you to improve the production?
So what did you add specifically to this practice? Was it, kind of like a lot of patchwork dentistry? They were just doing a lot of basic fillings and not a lot of specialty work? Like what was the procedure mix that you added?
Yes. There was a lot of let's watch decay. There was a lot of, kind of perio that was undiagnosed, and we had to come in and kind of determine, okay, so how are we going to handle these patients that have been used to, they have 7mm pockets, but they're getting a puppy. What do we do about that? How do we handle the patient that's not used to coming into the practice and, being told that you really need to have a deep cleaning? Like you can see the sub-G calc all over the x-rays. So a lot of it was patient management. A lot of it was systems. A lot of it was making sure you have a good support staff, making sure your hygienists are on board. There's so many things that go into making a practice successful. And that was kind of what we had to do, is just put these systems in place in order to allow that to happen. So, but location is the other thing, is it in a location that is conducive to growth?
So how about this one? Was it in like a strip mall? Was it in a professional building? Was it the demographics favorable? What allowed you guys to grow?
The location was perfect. It was in a little strip mall, not a big strip mall, but it was in an area that is so highly residential that all the residents, like if you looked at it from above, you would just see rooftops, right? And you would be the strip mall that all these people were passing on their way to work and on their way home from work.
Okay.
And it's funny because one of the things that brought in a huge amount of patients was we had this wall that was kind of facing the freeway, that when you get off the freeway, that's the first thing you see. And we had a sign up on this wall. And you technically, like, we weren't supposed to have the sign there for longer than 90 days. And it was like this constant struggle, like, oh, we have to ask for permission. And then they ask us if they could take it down. And then we have to beg them to allow us to put it back up again. And then we ask for forgiveness. And, so the sign was really, really crucial. And people would say, I was just driving home from work and I saw your sign. And it was sometimes as simple as that.
Was the sign like anything fancy, or was it just like dentist or, Dr. Banchik? Like what did it say on the sign? Or was it just the fact that it was so perfectly placed to where people were driving and stopping and getting off the freeway?
Yeah, it was nothing fancy. I designed all of our signs myself. So nice. I assure you, nothing was fancy about it. It was just, we welcome new patients and the name of our practice and the phone number in big letters. So it really was just, there was no message. There was no special pricing. It was just, we're here. We welcome new patients. Come see us. And that was it.
That's awesome. And just the at some point you're just like, can we just buy the wall? Like, what would it take? Did you offer to like, can we like pay you to keep this up? And they just like were adamant, or was it just not even part of the commercial property? It was like technically part of the like roadway system.
Oh, it was this. Oh my God! It was like a whole thing. I tried to find who owns the sidewalk, and then we figured out who owns that gas station where the wall was behind. So I tried to contact the owners of the gas station, and I said, we'll offer all of your employees free cleanings. Like, what can we do? Just let us keep the sign. And then it turned out that the sign was actually the city was controlling who, the wall belonged to the city or the county, I should say. So it wasn't even privately owned, and it was back and forth. And then there was a change of ownership, and but it worked out. I mean, for 5 years. And I believe to this day that sign is still there. And I think it was so crucial.
That's so funny. And it's ironic that like location can play that much of a factor, as well as just your sheer determinedness to make it work.
That sign was going to stay. I don't know what it had to take. I was willing to, at one point, actually, okay, so this is funny. So we had a college student at one point, because they made us take down that sign. And this is going to sound so cheesy, but it worked. We had a college student wear a tooth costume, and he kind of just let people know and that's where we were. And it was only a couple hours a day. And he stood there during the times of high traffic, like after work, like 6:00 at night or something like that, a couple hours a week. Like, it wasn't, a full-time thing, but it was just, you just let people know that you're there. And then we got the sign back up. So we were good.
That's awesome. Was he one that could like flip it and like do all the fancy sign moves? Or was he just doing the standard, I'm wearing a tooth costume with a sign, that's enough for me?
Yeah. We weren't that fancy. And he was so happy to do it. He just had so much fun with it. He used to wave at the cars. And it was actually the son of our hygienist who was doing it. So he just wanted to do it to have some fun. And we thought it was funny. And yeah, it didn't last very long, but
that's cool.
You do what you got to do.
No, that's awesome. Well, cool. Well, so at what point in this journey did you guys decide to uproot and leave Vegas? Because it sounds like your husband had, an opportunity in a multi-practice setting. You've had a couple practices on your own and had success with them. So what was the impulse to then start a new life on the East Coast, which is where you are now, versus Vegas?
Yeah, that's a really big question. And I think at the time, a couple of years ago, when this thought first occurred to us, our friends thought that we lost our mind. We had, they told us all about that. Everything was great. Our kids were in great schools. Las Vegas is an amazing place to live and to raise a family. Great schools. We had wonderful friends. The practices were really successful. But by that time, the partnership that my husband was a part of, that already sold.
Okay.
That was sold in 2016 to a PE firm. So we no longer had that. But I think I had a milestone birthday that was coming up, and you kind of start to think, I think the first part of your career and your young professional life, you spend doing things that you're supposed to do. Like you're supposed to go to school, and then you go to grad school, and then you do a residency, then you get married, and then you have kids. All these things that are they're sort of kind of defined for you.
Expected.
Yeah, almost. And you have to work and you have to try really hard, but you're always fighting to reach these milestones, right?
Yeah.
You kind of know. And at some point, so I was turning 40, and
I thought you were going to say turning 30. You said milestone. I just had to assume you're 29, turning 30. You're like, you know what? Time to make a change.
Yeah, it was worse than that. It was 40. I don't
40 is the new 30 though. That's what they're saying.
It is. I don't feel a day over 25. So that's the good news. But my poor husband, I don't know what I'm going to come up with when I turn 50. God help us. But, you start to think, like, what do you really want out of life? And not just, oh, I want to go on a nice vacation, or I want to, build a nice house, or, things like that. You start to think about the day to day, right? You think, what I want to see when I first wake up in the morning, and when I take my kids to school, and what does all of that look like? Literally your day-to-day life, hour by hour. And we started thinking about it. And what's interesting is we were flying to the Dominican Republic with my husband and meeting some friends there. And we flew with a stopover in Charlotte. And as we were landing into Charlotte, and I've never been there before, I kind of just looked down and saw the green trees and the water, the lakes, the rivers, and it was so beautiful. And we were used to being in the desert,
Right. Vegas is very much the opposite. Okay, time for some Facebook reviews of Q Optics. The first one here is regret. This is someone who wished they could have had Q Optics Loop. They said, don't do, and they said a company name that we won't mention here, but it rhymes with fiber optic. Don't do fiber optic. Their customer service has been terrible for me and buddies from my same school. If I had the option, I definitely would have gone with Q Optics. Another one here by Setu. She says, I've researched and tried all of the different brands of loops, and Q Optics are the best loops, hands down. I got the prismatic and have noticed a huge difference in my work and posture. I like what Nick Hill did here. He said, a few classmates and I met the Oroscoptic, Surgitel, Designs for Vision, and Q Optics rep for lunch, each one on a separate day. Good call. That would have been bad to just invite them all for a big rumble. He says, I liked the Q Optics product the most lightweight, great design, no need for side shields since the frames are OSHA compliant, amazing customer service, and optical quality works well for me. I purchased the 3.5x non-prismatic. Okay, last review. Laura said, I have Q Optics Prismatic 4.0 and they are the best investment I've made in dental school. This was a post on a dental student Facebook page, and so there's a lot of like, oh, my school didn't offer Q Optics, and then there's people saying, just buy them anyways. Like, this is 100% worth it. You're using these every single day. It's your neck, it's your back, it's the quality of your work. It's worth the investment no matter what, whether you're a dental student, whether you're a new dentist, whether you're an established dentist. These are just fantastic loops. Check them out at qoptics.com. Email sales@qoptics.com with the promo code SP19 for a discount on your loops and light combo.
So the whole time we're in the Dominican Republic, I couldn't get Charlotte out of my mind. And I just kept thinking that it's got to be the most beautiful place in the country. And there's a different life. There's a different world, and we haven't seen it. So on the way back, I told my husband, I said, listen, make me a list. Make a list of what you want your life to look like. Give me the day to day, give me the rest of your life in a list. And he did. So we compared and we realized that we wanted to be somewhere else.
What about your life in Vegas and the possibility of living somewhere like Charlotte, North Carolina? Like what were the things that drove you to that decision?
I think, crazy as it sounds, we were really craving the forests and the trees and the rivers. We wanted to be by the water. I've always dreamed of retiring on a lake somewhere and living in a small town. That was the other thing. We really, really wanted to live in a smaller town, coming from grad school in New York City and then living in Las Vegas. And there was something that really pushed us to want to be in a total suburban area. And that's where we ended up. We're in a small little town called Waxhaw. It's a suburb of Charlotte. And it's kind of country-ish. It's totally the opposite.
Is it like the very growing edge of Charlotte then?
It is. It really is. It's a very much a growing area, and it's very suburban, but you have Charlotte within a 10, 15, 20-minute drive, you're in this metropolitan city. So you definitely have access to all of it. But then you drive 10 minutes south and you are in a small, small town, like cows and horses and farmers markets and, like raw milk delivery, which is one of my favorite things.
Nice.
Yeah, we're in a small town.
Well, so that would be part of my wife's dream is to have chickens. And I totally want to get on the raw milk train. So we're both lactose intolerant. So at the end of the day, it would have to be raw milk plus some lactate pills. But I like legit nutritional science major from undergrad. And I'm read a bunch of these like Michael Pollan type books and like all the benefits of some of these things that our society has done away with. So you're a fan, 2 thumbs up of the raw milk?
Yes. I'm a huge fan of everything that's small. And to this day, we've been here for about 6 months. I still drive around and I look around and I'm just, I'm in love with the fresh fruits and vegetables that people grow. And it's funny you mentioned chickens. So one of the first friends that I made when we moved to Charlotte, she's a dentist and her husband's a dentist. So we were over at their house for dinner and they have chickens.
Nice.
I don't think I've ever seen a live chicken in my life. And they were just roaming in her yard, and the eggs, she had fresh eggs on the countertop, not refrigerated because they can be kept on the countertop if they're fresh.
Right.
So
yeah, no, that's our dream right there. So your friends are living our dream. So that's awesome.
You have to come visit and see Waxhaw, and we can get you some fresh eggs and show you some chickens.
Awesome. No, I'd love that.
Yeah.
So and I can kind of see a little bit of why your friends were making fun of you, because on the face of it, it can seem like you guys don't have any family in Charlotte. You don't have like concrete scientific type reason that you wanted to be there. It was very much a feeling and a life and starting over and kind of touchy-feely. Is that fair to say?
Yes. It was actually pretty crazy because who does that, right?
Yeah.
The practice was amazing. And even we had a couple of buyers look at it and they would do their research and ask around because Vegas was small enough. And they'd say, we don't understand. Why
is this for sale?
Yeah. Why are you guys selling? And we just built a house
in Vegas. Like what year did you finish?
Oh, we moved in 2016 and it took us like 2.5 years to build it. And yeah, we did that, which was kind of a, bucket list item on my list. Yeah. Everything was great, but it wasn't our place. Huh. That's not where we were supposed to be. And thinking long-term retirement, there was a lake, there was a lake involved and there was water, trees, and we had to go get it.
And that's awesome to hear too, because a lot of times on our show, we have people who have 400,000 plus of student loans, and they're thinking of their first years out of dental school. And we've had some examples of people who were willing to go anywhere for the opportunity. So rather than letting location drive their decision, they were saying, you know what, this is going to be my sacrifice. Rather than going to where I want to be, I'm going to where I'm needed. And I'm going to use a few years to kind of pay down loans and really take advantage of the best opportunities. And then I'll turn around and at that point, either stick around or sell the practice and move to somewhere that they want to be. But I think the flip side to that is if you know what you're doing, you can probably be successful anywhere. The demographics, it seems like you've found a favorable area within Charlotte that is growing, and it's not in the heart of Charlotte with a bunch of other dentists, though I'm sure you could have made that work too if that's what you wanted to have done. But I just think there's something to knowing what you want in your lifestyle design and being willing to backwards plan and make whatever it takes happen to get there. And sometimes that takes some courage. So I think it's really inspiring to hear that from you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said about moving to where the opportunity is at. And especially in those first, 15 to 20 years. And that's exactly what I was talking about, where when I said, you bust it out, you work hard, you make sacrifices. My husband and I are used to working some crazy hours between the two of us. And that's been the case for many, many years. Sometimes we graduate dental school and both of us have all the debt, in the world. And with student loans, NYU and Boston, they weren't cheap.
Not cheap schools, no.
No. Although that was, 2000, early 2000s, it wasn't as bad as it is now. But yeah, we worked. I think in my husband's 15 years of practice, he has never taken a sick day. Maybe once, maybe, but never. And it was 5 to 6 days a week, long days. It was a lot of learning. It was a lot of learning complicated procedures. He learned how to place implants and how to become really good at Invisalign, how to do surgical procedures. And he put in the time. And I do believe that you have to go in the beginning where the job is at and where the opportunity is at. And it might not be the place that you had in mind as your perfect place to live, but it doesn't mean you can't have a dream and eventually end up there. I think we all kind of get boxed into this, I'm going to start up a practice or I'm going to, be wherever I'm going to be. And that's the rest of my life. It doesn't have to be that way.
That's awesome. Well, and I love this because it's like, you're starting from scratch halfway through and it's totally going to work and it's going to be awesome. So let's dive into the startup a little bit. So what were you looking for in terms of location and demographics and how did you find and pick your current location?
Yeah. So location for us was everything. And it had to be favorable both demographically as well as lifestyle.
Right.
At this point, that's what it was. Back in Las Vegas, we were driving long distances and between practices and across town to this practice, to that practice. You were always kind of driving and working. And one of the things that was really important to us when we moved was we wanted to be next door to wherever it was that our practice was at, if we could make that work.
Right.
So location from that aspect was really important, but location for, as far as a practice location was huge. So I definitely had certain criteria that we were looking for, and we worked with a local real estate agent who he mostly does dental. He does do some regular commercial real estate, and we said, hey, this is what we want. And we wanted to be in a residential neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted to look from, the bird's eye view from Google Maps, and I wanted to see rooftops. I guess I wanted something similar to what we had.
I love that visual, that criteria, because that's something that is very tangible. It's not very it's not going to show up in a report. It's going to show up from you scouring locations, finding potential locations, and then just being aware of what surrounds this. If it's surrounded by commercial strip after commercial strip and, office buildings and retail,
people are going to have to like find you amongst all of this versus if you are the option and you're surrounded by homes, then somehow that kind of just has to work in your favor almost.
Exactly. Exactly. I thought that was really important. And the truth is, as much as I advise my clients to work with a company like Dentagraphics or Practice Cafe, and I say, hey, get the report. Let's look at official numbers. Or if your real estate agent can get you, specific demographics reports, that's great. We never did that.
That's what I was going to ask next was, Did you get the report? And the answer is no. You're like, no, we don't care.
No. So we never did that because we did our own.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. We did have the report from our real estate agent, but it definitely wasn't anything like, demographics with the circles and the miles and the number of dentists. So what I did, and it was a little bit time consuming, but I felt like it was, it was important to understand, is I put together a spreadsheet of who our competition was. Who are the practices that are within like a 3 to 5 mile radius? How many practices are there? Because in this day and age, we have the luxury of Google and the luxury of mapping out and measuring distances and getting so much information just from an internet search,
Right.
And so it was really important for us to know who's located where. And obviously, we looked at the visibility and the amount of traffic. Like we wanted to be off of a busy street. That was important,
Right.
the traffic density and the population growth in the area. That had to be another factor. Let's see, we looked at home values, we looked at income, and we wanted to be in a specific demographic area for that. That was important also. And it was also important because that was where we were going to live. That was where our kids were going to go to school. So all of these things kind of came into play.
Would you say that your kind of ideal target patient or demographic was more kind of like upper middle class, higher income, because that's kind of where you guys would be living as dentists, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to be in an area where moving to a new place where you really don't know anybody and nobody knows you. No one's heard of you. Nobody knows who you are. You have no connections or ties to any organizations. So we wanted to end up in a community where we could really feel connected to the people around us, where we could feel connected to the schools and to the local organizations and to be a part of the community. And that was a platform, and it's going to continue to be a platform for all of our marketing efforts as well.
One of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking about this was doing that demographic report yourself, I think really gives you a visceral sense of not only the quantity, but the quality of the competition. So especially, you have experience looking at practices and helping people buy practices. We haven't really gotten into that on the show, and maybe we'll have to talk about that on another episode. But you have a natural sense for evaluating practices. But I think that there's some value in building that spreadsheet yourself versus pulling the report. And if someone hasn't done this before, then absolutely pay for the report and absolutely get a third party to help you with this. But by the time you were done with that, I can imagine that you knew who your competition was going to be, what kind of marketing was going to be effective, where the low-hanging fruit was, how you could stand out from the practices in your area. Would you agree with that?
100%. 100%. And you look, there's certain things, there's certain columns that I had that allowed you to get that idea and to exactly determine all the things that you just mentioned and figure out, well, what procedures are they not doing? And what are the hours they're not open? And do they take the same insurance that I plan on taking? Or maybe they're more out of network. And not only that, but one of the things that I felt really strongly about is we've always really liked to have good relationships with the dental community wherever we were at, whatever that means. I think there's a lot of times and a lot of areas where there's a lot of competition and there's a lack of support. There's a lack of a sense of community. And we really wanted to feel like we knew the dentist, and we were participating in the dental society meetings and things like that. So it wasn't just a competition thing. We also really wanted to know who they were. So those relationships are really important in a practice with other general dentists as well as with specialists. So it's important to do your research, to know who surrounds you, to absolutely know what those offices are offering, what they're not offering, and how you're going to be different. Is there a void in the community that you are going to fill? And that's really the premise of our whole, how we're planning on growing and establishing our marketing systems.
Is there anything specific that you saw that you're like, okay, we can either do this better or fill in this gap or this niche? And I love that you're building this list not as like a list of enemies, but you're like, these are our friends. It's like these are our potential colleagues, rather than like, oh, I got to beat this guy and this girl and this practice and this. It's a community that you're building in your mind.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. I really think that we're all in this game together and we have to be there for each other. And there's lots of situations in which patients are shared for one reason or another. And you, especially being the new guy that nobody knows, you have to earn respect of your peers. You have to respect them in return. And I do think that that's really important. So, to answer your question, there were definitely some things that we're doing differently. For example, just a really easy one is most of the practices around here are closed on Fridays.
Okay.
So a lot of them, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of practices are closed on Fridays. So as much as, our list, you remember that list I talked about, our list involved, not working 5 or 6 days a week, and
right.
Fridays, on that list, but that's something that we're going to have to compromise on, and we're working Fridays. So, things like that. There's a few things that I feel that we do differently. One of them is we do a lot of procedures at our office. My husband's an excellent dentist with so much implant training, and he approaches his cases so carefully with a cone beam, with planning, with proper imaging. So we do a lot of things at our practice. A lot of offices are too busy to do that. They don't even have the time. They're packed. So that's something that I think is different.
That's awesome. So what would you, and first off, one of my thoughts was it would be really cool to turn this spreadsheet into something that we could share with our listeners, like a blank version of it. Obviously not your spreadsheet with the people in your area, but just kind of a template of this, not as a, this is the end all be all, but as something that like is a tool for, hey, if I want to get a real sense for my area, my market, my competition, my friends, my potential friends, going through the exercise of filling this out and highlighting and finding the areas where they can fill in their niche, I think that would be really useful to people. Is that something that maybe we could talk about? Maybe we can talk about this off air if you'd be willing to share that with people.
Oh, I am so happy to share that. I'll tell you that one of the things that I've developed through the last 15 years is I think I have a spreadsheet for every system in the dental practice, and I'm absolutely happy to share this one. I think it's so important for everyone who's considering a startup to spend a little bit of time doing something like this. And it's almost like it almost becomes part of your business plan, right?
Yeah.
You have to know your competition. And yeah, you can provide the dentographics report, but there's so much more value to it if you've done it yourself and you understand who the doctors around you are. And yeah, absolutely. And why don't I put something together and we can make that available to the listeners?
Cool. No, that would be awesome. Well, we've only got probably like 5 more minutes before we're running out of time on this episode. What would be kind of your next step after you've done this area analysis? How did you actually select a site, and like how big of a square foot were you looking for? How many ops did you want to have? Like, what was your next step after doing this analysis?
Yeah, so we really wanted to keep things small. We weren't looking to build a giant practice.
Okay.
We found a space that was 1,790 square feet.
Okay.
And the goal was to maximize every inch of that. So, one of the things that's really important when looking at these spaces, and this isn't something that most of us think about, but not only do you have to look at the size, because a lot of times you'll hear dentists say, well, I have a 2,000 square foot size space, but what is the shape of it? And is the shape of it going to allow you to maximize every inch of space? Or are there, weird corners or weird angles that are going to compromise the amount of ops that you can have or make something just look awkward or inaccessible? So we found the space and it was 1,790 square feet. It was a corner unit,
Okay.
which I loved because not only did that give us a lot more windows. So when you're doing smaller ops and when you're trying to, be really efficient, exactly. Thank you. With your space layout, windows are really great for making the space feel more airy and roomy. So, but also it allowed us to have signage on two sides,
Right.
and then a back side. So three sides. And it actually just coincidentally, I'd like to say that I thought of this all on my own, but I didn't. The sign that's on the side of the building, the city allowed us to make it really, really big.
Huh.
And yeah, the fact that it's a corner unit, it made it so visible. And we were able to put this big, giant, Rayfield Dental sign on the side. And it worked out really, really well.
That's awesome. So was it hard to negotiate this space? And I'm assuming that, and I don't know why I assume this, but Charlotte versus Vegas, I would kind of think that Charlotte's more expensive than Vegas per square foot. Is that a fair assumption or not really?
Not really. It all depends. I wouldn't say that. This space for us is definitely more expensive than the space we had in Vegas, but only because the area is.
It's a nice area. Yeah.
It's a nice area and we have street visibility. We are, a single story building that is right off a main street, corner unit. You're going to pay for that.
Yeah.
And we knew that. So that was part of the reason we said, well, let's get a smaller space, but in a better location.
And then maximize the space.
Maximize the space. So we put in, and I can share pictures of our practice on the
Facebook group.
Yeah. Just so that you guys can get an idea. So we have 5 ops and a 6th op that is fully plumbed, which right now functions as a doctor's office. So we literally have everything we need. There's a good size sterilization storage area with those fabulous tip out bins and a break room. Cone beam. It's a very nice practice and every inch of space is maximized. So they kind of said, well, you can't fit 6 ops into 1,700 square feet and be comfortable. But we did, and you can.
Your tip out bin wall is a thing of beauty. There's so much deep seated organizational envy when I saw the picture of that wall, which then was I was also just as impressed with your other organizational tasks and passions, and we also share a deep love for LaCroix, which I love. I'm getting off Diet Coke and I drink like a 6-pack of LaCroix per day easily.
Yes, me too. Our refrigerator is always stocked. I have to tell my kids to pace themselves. I'm like, no, you cannot have 3 today. That is too much.
I think I average like 6. I'm not even kidding.
Oh my God. I will not tell my kids that. I tell them dentists don't think it's the best idea to have so many in one day. So
fair enough. Well, no, I'm a high caries risk patient. But I think LaCroix is better than diet soda. So that's I'm upgrading right now.
Oh, for sure. It's my absolute favorite and we can't live without it. So yes. And it's funny. I forgot you did see that post about the drawers and the refrigerator. I do. I love to have an organized office. I think that there have to be systems in place for everything. And any problem that arises in a dental office as just, part of regular practice management, there is a system to fix it. There's a solution to prevent it. Systems in a practice are 100% everything. And it just takes time to develop them and implement them. But I think that's what makes a practice really successful is having the answers and having a plan.
That's awesome. And we originally, when we started our acquisition season, which was season 2 of our podcast, it was a systems season. So, E-Myth Revisited was like one of the theme books of the season. And, we had Dr. Scott Luna on, and we had some other people on that were all about systemization. Were you the tip out bins? I first heard of that through Breakaway and Dr. Scott Luna. Was that something you had seen elsewhere, or, where did you start using the tip out bins?
I think so. Scott Luna that man is a genius. I have to say, he's absolutely my idol. And I took Breakaway courses just last year, actually.
Cool.
And I was like, well, whatever you're selling, I'm buying. Just where do I sign up? I was ready to give him my firstborn.
Yeah.
So the man is amazing. But the tip out bins, so I've actually had them on my Pinterest page for years and years and years. And I knew that one day I was going to build this practice and it was going to have that wall. And I think a couple of years ago, I even talked about it with my office manager, where we showed it, we were showing each other the picture off of Pinterest. And we were like, oh God, that is such a dream. And then, Breakaway talked about it. And we ended up going with our own configuration.
Yeah.
Necessarily the Breakaway one, but they're fantastic.
That's awesome. Well, I think we're going to have to break this off and do another episode here, because this is good. And we've gotten a lot of really specific things. And I'm excited. Maybe by that next episode, we'll have a link lined up where we can get people the example spreadsheet so that they can kind of do the manual labor to learn their market, to do their own kind of version of a demographic analysis and competition analysis. So would you be okay if we cut things off here and then we'll continue your startup story next time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll put that spreadsheet or worksheet together and we'll make that available to everyone that needs it.
Cool. Well, this has been part 1 of a multi-part series with Dr. Olya Banchik. Sorry, I said it wrong. I knew I was going to screw up your last name at some point. But thank you so much for coming on the show. And I'm really, really excited for the future episodes that we have in store. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. We'll talk to you next time. Okay, I'm really excited. I don't know what exactly this is going to look like. I don't know if we're going to do intros and outros together for a little while for this upcoming season, or if we're just going to kind of do some update episodes between us, or if she's going to do interviews. But I was just so grateful to get Dr. Banchik's perspective on everything. Olya being a mid-career dentist versus all of us who are straight out of dental school and embracing the craziness that many people on our show do of early aggressive ownership. She's done this before. She's coached others. And now she's getting to kind of start over and do it all over again with her own startup in a completely new state. Really refreshing perspective of, rather than hustle to pay it down, which she did, which is what a lot of us are looking at. She's looking at, okay, now I've paid my dues. Let's set up the life that we truly want and are looking forward to enjoying. So many great tidbits. We're going to have I think it's going to take at least another 2 episodes to kind of fully tell her story and get as much kind of wisdom from her perspective and her personal journey. And then she's going to interview me for my upcoming ownership partnership opportunity, which has been pushed back. So I still can't talk about it. It's going to be a little bit longer here. But so it's going to be really fun to get her perspective, seeing that she does transitions for people and I'm going through a transition. She's going to kind of coach me on air through this as well a little bit as I tell my story. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you really appreciated Olya's perspective, reach out to her. I think by this Friday, we're going to have the link for that spreadsheet. She sent it to me in my email and I haven't even had a chance to make a link for it and stuff like that. But I think we'll be able to get that in there. So hopefully by this Friday, it's in the show notes. If not, you can reach out to Dr. Olya, but there should be a link there where you can download that market analysis spreadsheet in the show notes of the show. So hopefully I'll have a bunch of fun interviews as well from Dental Success Summit. If any of you guys are there, this comes out on Friday. I'll be there this Friday when this airs, but it's going to be a ton of fun and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys. We'll talk with you guys next week on the Shared Practices podcast.